Okay, so today for our G Talk, our Warrior Talk, we have invited a Goshen Hall of Famer, someone who is on our Goshen Hall of Fame. If you go out to our lobby out here, he's on the Wall of Fame. So we invited, this is Mr. Rise. He is a former high school principal here at Goshen. He's a former board member. He lived in our community for decades. He's from Latrobe, Pennsylvania. He is in the Ohio High School Athletic Association Hall of Fame. He's in the Goshen Hall of Fame. He played football at Pitt. And he has a lot of life stories that I think are good for you to hear. So with no further ado, let's give a nice welcome to Mr. Rise.
Good afternoon. I was talking to Mr. Nabnett briefly before I came in here, and he told me that sometimes these motivational speeches based on your evaluation have been a little boring to you. So my goal today is don't bore you. Don't bore you. So what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is getting up every day, getting out of bed, and getting after it. I'm talking about life. I'm talking about life. I want to, I guess he snuck out on me, but I remember Mr. Nabnett when he was your age, and he was sitting out there where you're sitting. And you know what? He was never no different than you. He was no different than you. But he's accomplished some things with his life. When Mr. Nabnett called me this morning and asked me to speak, shortly after that the phone rang, and it was a friend of mine from when I was a young kid, grade school, high school. His name's Tom Doc Hinger. And you know, he was a buddy of mine, and we grew up with a fishing pole in our hands, and a shotgun in our hands, and a shaker of salt in our pockets. That shaker of salt was we'd go by somebody's garden, we'd steal a tomato out of that garden, put the salt on that tomato, and we'd eat that tomato. And you know, when we were in high school, Tom was about 5'4" and weighed about 110 pounds. And he tried to play every sport there was to play. And he gave it his all, but you know, he just didn't have the athletic ability to be able to play, but he kept trying, he kept plugging. And we graduated from high school. This is years ago. And the Vietnam War was going on. And he got drafted. He went into the Army. And he got sent to Vietnam, and they were out on patrol one day and they got ambushed. And 90 of them died that day. And he survived. Now there's a book about him, written about him, called They Marched into Daylight. And this guy who couldn't make the starting lineup in the football team ever is now each year invited back to West Point to an Army home football game as an honorary captain of the Black Knights because of what he accomplished during his military duty. I've got a great deal of admiration for Tom. There are a lot of people I have a lot of admiration for. You know, and I'll just point out a few of them. Last Saturday, or no, Friday, I drove down to Tennessee to watch Notre Dame Academy out of Chattanooga play for a state football championship. And their head football coach is Charlie Fant. Now everybody calls him Charles today, but he'll always be Charlie to me. I remember when Charlie sat out there, just like you. He was coaching for a state championship. I sat beside his brother, Phil. Phil went to West Point, was Army's leading rusher in football for 3 years, graduated, became an Army Ranger, an officer in the Army Rangers. When he left the Army, he became an FBI agent. He is now this country's leading expert on interior terrorism, homegrown terrorism. He travels all over this country teaching different police agencies and departments on how to deal with homegrown terrorists. I remember when he sat out there, just like you. A week ago, I live in South Carolina now. A week ago, after I got up here, I went down to have lunch with some people at Eli's Barbecue. Anybody heard of Eli's Barbecue? Way to go. Well, Eli's Barbecue is owned and operated by Elias Lasering. And it was voted the best new restaurant in the greater Cincinnati area. I sat there and talked with Eli, and in came the mayor of Cincinnati. In came Yvette Simpson, who's on the council at Cincinnati, because when we were finished eating lunch, he was going to he had a scheduled meeting with them. He now has 2 locations, one down on the river and one down in Findlay Market. I remember when Eli sat right out there. I remember when Eli told me, Mr. Rice, I don't have enough money to go to college. My grades aren't good enough to go to college. But I'm going to try to make something out of myself. And, you know, he kept plugging away and plugging away. Went to work as a short order cook for some people. And now he's one of the top young businessmen in the Cincinnati area. Is Carrie here? Mance? Miss Mance. I remember when she was Carrie Fitzsimmons. Yeah, with the big hair. You know, one of my favorite young ladies in this world. You know, life hadn't been easier for her. But she kept plugging. And she certainly is a success. I remember when Carrie sat out there. I remember a young man by the name of Chris York. Chris York had an older brother, Kenny. Kenny was an all-state football player. He was about 6'4", 280 pounds as a junior in high school. Was being recruited by everybody in this country. Chris was a freshman that year, and he was 4'8", and he weighed 77 pounds. And he said, everybody kept saying, boy, isn't it a shame about poor old Chris. He didn't get the size that Ken got. And Chris came to me, and we used to meet over at the old high school over there about 7 o'clock every night. And we'd lift weights and work out. And he was a sophomore. He grew. He was 5'1" and weighed 104 pounds. But then he hit a growth spurt. And he grew up. And by his senior year, he got a scholarship to college. Now, I had to go out and talk to his mom out there because his mom wasn't going to let him go to college because she was afraid of what all the obstacles out there in this world and this life. And I convinced her to give him a chance, and he got a chance. And he met a young lady in college, and they got married and ended up at Vanderbilt University. And she became a world-renowned pediatrician. And he got his master's degree in hospital administration. Now, I'm telling you, he was about a C student, C-minus student when he was here. But today, he is the director of the largest hospital in the metropolitan Dallas-Fort Worth area. I just got an email from his wife, just was the lead doctor on some type of operation that was performed on this baby. It's the first time it has ever been done in the world. And this baby is surviving. I remember when he sat right out there. I have to apologize because when I called Carrie Fitzsimmons, we've got some awfully successful young ladies who graduated from Goshen, and I still know them as their maiden name because Carrie could probably help me and tell me their married names. But Renee Neerman is a leading physician at Children's Hospital today. Her mom worked as a secretary at the high school. I remember when she sat out there. Colleen Spears is the president and CEO of Kroger's Pharmaceutical Division. I remember when she sat right out there. So what I want to point out to you is there's example after example after example of people just like you who are living lives that they didn't even know existed when they were your age. I was talking about Chris York, and a number of years ago, he was in town. He called, and we went out to eat at Toots. I guess Toots doesn't exist anymore. We went out to eat at Toots, and he and his wife and my wife, and we went out to eat, and we were finished up eating, and they brought the bill around, and I grabbed the bill, and he took it from me. And I said, well, let me pay for that. He said, no. He said, Coach, let me pay for it. He said, you don't understand. He said, I live now in Nashville, which is where he lived back in. And he named some famous country music singer. And he said, she's my next door neighbor. I'm lucky enough to live in a multi-million-dollar home. He said, I didn't even know life like I live now even existed, let alone wanted to live that life. And he said, if it hadn't been for Goshen High School, I'd have never had this opportunity. I remember when he sat right there and looked up. I don't want to keep rolling on so I bore you, but I just want to point out to you that world's wide open for you out there. And it's wide open for you out there, whether you were the star of this year's championship football team or you were never good enough to play football at all. Whether you're the president of the National Honor Society or you're just wondering how the hell am I going to graduate. That world's out there. Get up every day. Get out of bed. Stretch a little bit. Make sure you love every day. Make sure you laugh every day. Make sure you pray every day. And believe in yourself. Because you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to accomplish through hard work. You don't have to be the most talented. You don't have to be the smartest. But you got to be the hardest worker. You got to be the hardest worker. God bless you for this opportunity. You know, this old man lives, I can tell you, hey, I grew up in a steel mill town. My dad was a steel mill worker. My mom was a homemaker. And I got fortunate in life. I got taught a good work ethic. And today I live in Harbor Island, South Carolina. If I was home today, I just saw it was 78 degrees. I'd be out in T-shirt and shorts. I live a dream life. I sit in my back deck and I look out and the ocean's right there. I watch the waves break. I'm talking about Goshen High School. You know who gave me that opportunity? Latrobe High School. And I was fortunate enough to be able to take advantage of that. You got great people around you here. Great people. Great teachers. Great coaches. If you listen to them, they're not going to steer you wrong. Rely on them. See them as examples, because they're outstanding examples. Follow their paths. Listen to what they have to say. And go out there and whip this world. Good luck. God bless you. And always bleed red and gray. Thank you.